Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and we are getting an update today from Stillwater Critical Minerals. It's traded on the TSX.V under the ticker PGE and on the OTCQB under the ticker PGEZF. We are joined today by the President and CEO of Stillwater Critical Minerals, Mike Rowley. And Mike, it's always great getting you on the show to get an update on the company. Just as an observation, when we see what's going on in the markets and we're starting to see a little more investor interest as gold and silver and copper rally, just as a side note, you've got quite a bit of copper exposure in the deposit that you've defined at Stillwater West, but we really haven't seen it trickle down into the nickel and PGM space after a pretty rough slog, but we have seen nickel prices start to claw their way back higher again. Platinum has flipped above palladium recently as far as its metal value relative to the other, and there is a little bit of rumbling under the surface of people starting to look at the PGM and nickel space as a contrarian play, especially as the rest of the commodity sector is starting to heat up. So would just love to get your sense of where things are in the sector right now, and as far as the sense of where investor sentiment is in the commodities, in particular in nickel and PGM companies.
Oh, you bet. And glad to be back. Good to be chatting again. Yeah, we have seen some life, and the TSX Venture Index is up over 600 finally, something like 610 right now. And that's something that we'd been waiting for. Peter Grandich has called this the worst bear market, most vicious bear market in the past 40 years. And I think we're finally seeing some movement now. Ross Beatty last year promised us explosive gains in our sector, and maybe he was a year early. His crystal ball probably works better than ours, but I think that point is finally upon us, and we're finally seeing some buying and some movement, some appetite.
Well, when you look at the share price action, a lot of people will throw up their arms and say, Mike, what's going on with the share price? But maybe put it in context with the rest of the nickel and PGM sector, because it's across the board.
Oh, it absolutely is. And our share price has tracked the indices, and a lot of our peers just lockstep. I mean, it's really not us. And then to that point, we bottomed at something like 12.5 cents Canadian, moved up to 19 without really any news, certainly not drill results. So, the rising tide floats all boats when it wants to. And really, we should be valued several times higher than we are, just with a proper functioning market that we have not seen in a number of years. Nickel, palladium, platinum have been hit harder than other metals. Copper is currently grabbing headlines right now. Gold is also a flavor of the moment, as I think you mentioned. We are predominantly nickel, and also known for PGEs given our proximity to Sibanye, highest grade PGE producer in the world. We do have significant copper. We have 500 million pounds of copper in an active mining district. And that's something that we need to flag here as well.
Yeah, Mike, being a polymetallic deposit, nickel forward with PGMs, but also having that copper, and I would mention cobalt and chrome, just a lot of different metals in there. But the copper value sometimes gets overlooked, and most copper projects are polymetallic in nature to begin with. So I think it's a nice kicker to have as a co-credit in the mix for sure. Let's dig into some of the recent drill results, though. So this is the first batch. I know you're going to release 2 different batches of drill results, was the plan we had discussed in our last interview together. Now, this one, you kind of have it segmented down. These 6 holes, 2,310 meters, were basically in the bulk tonnage, mid-grade, and high-grade areas. So let's talk to that first, that when you parse these results, you really have a little bit of everything from the lower grade bulk tonnage all the way up to the higher grade, but it's really those mid-grades that are what build mines. So let's maybe talk about the different grade profile.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because frankly, that's what Glencore is interested in. That's what the great mines of the world are, including our aspirational peers in the Platreef, South Africa. The high grades grab headlines, but they rarely make mines. If you look at the tonnages of some of these high grade projects, well, first of all, many of them don't have tonnages yet because they don't have resources. But the systems are small, and they can only support perhaps a 10 or 20 million ton resource. Those are rarely mines, and they rarely attract the attention of majors. Glencore, companies like that, they want to see 100 million tons minimum And in the case of Stillwater, we've already delineated that in our inferred resource, right? In that middle category, 120 million tons at over 0.5% nickel equivalent. That's nice stuff. That's over 1% of copper equivalent at current prices. Then you've got the bulk mineable case above that, the bigger numbers. And within that, you've got higher grades, which give good optionality based on metal prices and mining method. And that's what we tried to relate in this release. It's something that distinguishes us from other nickel projects out there, is that optionality and that scale.
Well, and just to that point, just an observation is that a lot of retail will flock to high-grade stories, even if it's just a drill play that's just poking a couple holes in the ground and comes back with something. And they get really animated if they see any high grade, because the adage, grade is king. And grade is king in all projects, but that's really a little bit more germane for like the gold companies, because some of those underground mines do make it in production. The vast majority of mines that are base metals and polymetallic are really open pit bulk tonnage mines with maybe a high grade underground components to them, that where you're getting a mix from both. But maybe just speak to the discussions you have with investors. Do you sense that same thing, Mike, that investors flock to high grade, but they shrug off the actual grades over long widths that'll actually become mine makers?
Yeah, the split is there, and it may tie back to what we said a minute ago about markets kind of rumbling back to life. It might be that those more speculative retail investors are the first ones in, and they like those flashy headline numbers and those discovery stories, but those don't build mines. The great majority of copper mined globally is lower grade porphyries, and they're not always pit. They're often block cave nowadays, less surface disturbance, but with the right geometry, you can block cave in a bulk mining scenario similar to the economics of a pit, actually. And it's worth noting that one of our aspirational peers, Ivanhoe, on their Platreef mine, South Africa, that's underground mechanized mining, right? Bulk mining. That's entirely possible now, and that is the majority of the world's metal supply, is those large low-grade and mid-grade scenarios.
And diving into these drill results, you have a line in here in the press release, which I think is maybe worth reiterating and maybe having you put some color on. And it's just that when you started working on the first ever detailed geological model for this project, for the Stillwater West Project, you really have three different kinds of mineralization. So this is kind of hard for people to wrap their head around, but you have that Platreef style of nickel, PGM, copper, cobalt, as you were just referencing from the South African model. But you also have these new, what you're calling the N-series mineralization, and it seems to be a later stage event that brought in this different type of mineralization or just another layer of it. And then you also have the stratiform reef type PGA nickel, copper, chromite mineralization. So you basically have three flavors of mineralization in this deposit, and as you're drilling some of these, sometimes you cross different types of that. Maybe break down why that's important, that it's such a mineral-rich system.
It's a very rich mineralized system. It's a big system. I mean, it's literally cubic kilometers, cubic tens of kilometers of mineralization, and it's never been modeled in detail. So we're in the happy place to take world-class rocks, one of the top 5 largest layered magmatic systems in the world, and bring these senior Ivanhoe geologists to the table to model it, and then bring Glencore in to fund it. It's frankly a lot of fun. It has the USGS, the U.S. Geological Survey, has their attention. They've been studying Stillwater Complex for decades with limited means, right? And now we're in there. And then it's got the attention of the DOD and the DOE as well, and the U.S. government. You saw me meet recently with senators and congressmen from Montana about this. This is quite fun stuff. So in terms of mineralization styles, we're the first ones to really add this up. We have the right team to add it up. The first and last ones you mentioned are appropriate to a layered magmatic system. They're basically very much like the Bushveld complex, the broader Platreef bulk tonnage style copper nickel sulfide driven stuff. And then those narrow chromite and even sulfide reefs, that's basically well documented, the Bushveld. The middle style, the N series, is a new thing. It's a new discovery. Stillwater, it's sort of an additional layer on top of that broadly layered backdrop. And it brings additional grade, which helps us with those headline numbers that we mentioned earlier are so important to win part of your audience. At Stillwater, we have the good fortune to drill them all quite often with the same drill hole. And quite likely any potential mines built here would simply mine them all. So the N series in that regard just become an upgrade on that backdrop where they happen to cross the envelope of what you're proposing to mine.
Well, Mike, you mentioned last time we talked that you were going to put out two different batches of drill results. The first one's, here we are, and you were looking at some of the mid-grade, some of the bulk tonnage, and a little bit of the N series. But I think the next batch you're looking forward to maybe intersected more of those. So maybe just speak to the batch of drilling still to come.
Sure. Yeah. The first three holes, those were focused on the N structures. We received those assays later. They also take a bit more modeling work because there's more structure involved. As you mentioned, they're late stage pulses. The whole complex was put down about 2.7 billion years ago, and the whole thing was kept hot underground, probably like 3 kilometers down, 10,000 feet. But within that 10 million sort of years of this thing being magmatic mush and processing there, these later stage pulses would have come up through, and they basically take the easiest pathway up, which is along old structures. And that appears to be what these N structures are. So they're bringing new mineralization along an easy path. They're also upgrading where they react with the previously laid down magmas. That was hinted at in this news release, and that will be expanded upon in the coming news release. Exciting stuff. And the first three holes indeed focused on those, and we're looking forward to relating where those are and what we hit.
Well, when we first started talking about these N series, I think there was only one or two holes, and some of those were you went back and reinterpreted some holes that were already drilled and realized there was this other later stage mineralized event going on here. I think you're up to 8 of these now on these N series, if that's correct. And I guess when you interpret the drill results that have come in here, and you're still waiting on the other ones to release, what does that mean for the 2024 drill program? How do these inform how things may change as far as the drilling strategy for this year?
Yeah, we indeed are currently at 8 of the N series, and you're absolutely correct that we first drilled them in 2020 and didn't know what it was. We knew it was different and new and exciting. We tagged it again in 2021. Really, it took Danny and Albie coming in, those ex-Ivanhoe guys, to really figure out what was going on here. There are definitely more N series. They run north-south across the almost perfectly cross-cutting the broader layered system, east and west of where we are. We've only modeled 8 of them to date. We've only drilled 2 of them. So as for what that means next, it's a question of which target type you want to focus on. And we need to focus on big economic nickel sulfide, and we're aligned with Glencore on that. So you will see us focus on these systems and the N structures where they cross the bigger EM anomalies. And we'll look to grow those. As you know, we've got 5 deposits across 9 kilometers, each of them defined by very good geophysics and then metals and soils above that. We will look to grow each of those in subsequent drill campaigns with a focus on both grade and tons.
Well, and just as we wrap up, I want to just maybe give you the chance to speak to any other catalyst the company's working on. Obviously, we'll be waiting on more drill results from Stillwater West and then the plan coming together for 2024. But you do have 4 other projects aside from this. So anything else that you want people to focus on in the midterm?
We are working on a lot of things internally. The government funding aspect becomes very important at Stillwater, given the U.S.'s drive to secure U.S. supply chains for 9 of the commodities that we have at Stillwater, driven by nickel, but also they're clear they want cobalt and others as well. That's very real. That was the meetings in D.C. when I saw you last in person. We're looking forward to more in that regard. Drill results are central, that next tranche of drill results. Other assets, correct. We will be doing work in the Kluane this year, another critical minerals project. We have interest in DOE grants at our Duke Island project in Alaska, and we'll report those as they become relevant. And then Heritage Mining is doing good work in Ontario on a gold asset that they're earning from us, and that gives us good exposure to the gold space. Bigger picture, we look forward to announcing our plans and objectives for this year in Montana, and I think you'll see us start to wrap more of a PEA level work, metallurgy, around what we have as we look to advance this. This is what the end users need to see. And I guess the final closing point is that the project is big enough now that we can start to wave our arms around what a mine might look like and what the economics might be. We certainly will look to continue to drill it and expand it. There's terrific expansion potential there. But if these end users need to see PEA level work done around it, then we'll do that as well.
All right. Well, so a lot going on with Stillwater Critical Minerals. We'll keep following along with all the news as it comes out. Just keep us posted, Mike. And if people listening in want to follow along with the company news, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you directly over to the company website to the news section. So you can also follow along with all of the different updates as they come out to market. And Mike, as always, looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Shad. You as well.